The Night Floaters, After Dark, Two Bizarre Stories. As you may know, I have been conducting research on the night floaters, which are beings able to detach their heads from the trunks of their bodies, the heads then being able to fly or float at will. They fly through the night to feed on the flesh and blood and sanity of their victims. Recently, I was contacted by a guy named John Thomas, and yes, I believe John Thomas is his real name, who wrote me that his great-grandfather had had an encounter with a night floater while working as a farmhand in the Palermo, Ontario area in the 1880s. I managed to find a brief newspaper account of the incident in the Oakville Record from August of 1883. And I quote, and please excuse the flowery language. A farmhand called Thomas was returning home from a barn dance last Saturday night when he had a most unusual experience. As the hour was late and he was feeling fatigued following the exertions of the evening, he decided to take a shortcut by following the dirt trail across land owned by Mr. Griffiths. It was a balmy evening, lit up by the brilliant rays of a full sturgeon's moon, and the young fellow had no problem finding his way, in spite of the lateness of the hour. Part way along the path, when out in the middle of a large section of open field, he began to imagine he was being followed, and turning around to look, was confronted by a hideous apparition, a severed head with a small, swart face, wild locks, and smoldering eyes of flame, staring him face to face. Thomas peeled away in abject terror, and didn't stop until he had obtained the end of the trail. Turning to see if he was still being pursued, he was frightened afresh to find the head hanging before him and regarding him with malicious intent. The plucky youth snatched a handful of loose dirt from the path and dashed it into the eyes of his uncanny pursuer, blinding it and causing it to emit a series of high-pitched shrieks. The young farmer took advantage of the confusion to hasten to a nearby barn, where he hid in the loft until daylight. Our only advice to him, and to other young fellows, is to avoid quiet precincts after dark, and to leave go the rye whiskey. A small squib in the same issue of the newspaper noted that floating or disembodied heads were a superstition of the local native peoples. In fact, the First Nations, which inhabited the area around the mouth of the 16-mile creek at Oakville, seem to credit the origin of flying heads, such as the night floaters, to extraterrestrial sources. According to an aged shaman interviewed at the time of the first white settlement in the early 1800s, the heavens were rent with peals of thunder, and the great heads fell from the swirling clouds into the black waters of the lake, i.e., Lake Ontario, only to rise again with much boiling and hissing to plague the people with their insatiable hunger for flesh and blood. Some scholars suggest the above quote is merely a parable to explain the creation and existence of blood-sucking insects such as mosquitoes, but could it also be an account of the origin of those anomalous beings known as night floaters? John also shared the following story about the night floaters, which had apparently happened to a friend of a friend of a friend of a friend. I pass it on without comment or explanation. I heard about some kids who were parked in a dark spot in the big park down in Clarkson. Well, as you know, that's not all that far from 999 Queen Street. i.e., the local mental hospital. Anyways, they're making out in the back seat with the radio on when there's an announcement about some mental case, a convicted murderer, escaping from the hospital. The girl gets upset and demands the guy take her home, which doesn't go over well, and he's arguing with her, when she suddenly starts screaming that someone is looking at them through the window. And when the guy looks up, he sees a face staring in the driver's side window at him. A face without a body attached, a night floater. The guy manages to crawl over the seat and starts the car, the head following him with its eyes, and they peel out of there and don't stop until they reach the traffic lights at Trafalgar and Lakeshore. When they realize they're both, butt naked. Like I said, no comment. But you can leave a comment below. And please drop a like and consider subscribing for more accounts of the night floaters, their origins, and their nefarious activities.